Hello, folks, and welcome to a Redgate webinar. This is How SQL Provision Speeds Up and Secures DevOps. We have a panel here today to discuss this topic. So we are going to introduce ourselves, and first we are going to head over to Anderson.
Thank you, Kendra. Hi, everyone. My name is Anderson Brangel, and just a quick context to my career. Like, I've always worked with SQL as a DBA, as a database developer. I played a little bit with business intelligence, and now as a pre-sales engineer here at Redgate, helping out not only just our customers, but also reaching out to the community and attempting to add as much value as it is possible. And just for those who are not aware, still not aware, at the end of last year, Redgate has opened an office here in Brisbane, in Australia. And we now have the ability to work closer and host webinars such as this one, which I would like to thank you very much, Kendra, in the US, and Hamish back in New Zealand to make this happen in a time zone that's acceptable and accessible for the Australian community. Thank you.
Fantastic. And Hamish, tell us about you.
G'day. Yeah, I'm Hamish Watson. I live in Christchurch, New Zealand, so I do have an accent. Not as good a one as Anderson, but still. I like to call myself a DevOps alchemist because I own my own company, so I get to call myself whatever ridiculous title I want. So yeah, I run a consultancy business now. I've been a DBA infrastructure guy for many years, and I am a friend of Redgate, and also love helping people understand the tools, understand the process associated with bringing DevOps to the database. My hashtag, and in fact my life goal, is to make stuff go. So yeah, it's cool to talk about how to make people's lives better through technology and process, i.e. DevOps.
Awesome. And I am Kendra Little. I am an evangelist at Redgate Software, which is a pretty funny job title if you haven't heard it before. What an evangelist does in a technology company is think about what's the best ways to use the technology to solve problems. What are the patterns and practices that work really well? And then also, what doesn't work really well? What could be better? How can we build tools that people can use to help things go faster? So that's what I do at Redgate. And today we're going to talk about something that can make things go faster. We're going to talk about automated provisioning, being able to very quickly set up and deploy new databases. And we're going to focus on a Redgate technology we have called SQL Provision that can help you automate provisioning of databases, where you can create images of databases and quickly clone databases. But you might wonder, what is the point of doing this? What do I really get out of this? And how does this fit into DevOps? So we're going to talk about some questions separated into a few categories. We're first going to talk about, does automated provisioning actually improve collaboration? What is the biggest problems that automated provisioning solves in a DevOps sense? How does it really enable DevOps? What does it do and what doesn't it do? Whether developers should use shared database environments or development environments, and we have some stats on how many are using each type. And then finally, different techniques for masking data, what's preferable. So we're going to go ahead and dive in, and we're going to talk about first, does automated provisioning improve collaboration? So I got a couple facts about this to sort of seed the discussion that we have of it. This is a screenshot from the 2019 State of Database DevOps report done by Redgate. And in this is finding number 4. You can, if you're looking for this in the database DevOps report itself, you'll see the number 4 on here. The question is, which of these best describe how closely your devs and your DBAs are integrated? And 40% said good. The biggest answer on the screen is, it's pretty good we have separate teams, but collaborate, and the DBAs kind of get involved as needed. Only 22% said great, where everybody is effectively working well as one team, right? So only 22% feel like they're actually on the same team. 13% said poor, where DBAs don't know what code changes are coming and they're deploying code and they're like, we don't know what's in here. And if things go wrong, it just like, is there anyone out there? 26% said okay. Yeah, oh, go ahead. What's it like to be in the 13%? Have you been there? Have you ever been there? I've been in the 13%. It's kind of lonely. It's kind of frustrating.
And you get pulled into those meetings without any context, and you're expected to provide some sort of enlightenment to it, and it's just not how it works. It's not how it efficiently works. So definitely not ideal.
Right. Yeah, like when something goes wrong, you have no context for what went wrong because it literally just came sailing over the wall at you, and you're like, I don't know, I just ran into this yesterday.
Yeah, and then you've been pulled into those change meetings, and you've been given like literally hundreds or if not thousands of lines of code that you need to immediately interpret it and prove it's gonna go wrong, and with much context. So we want to be on the other end of the spectrum where proper DevOps approaches are in place.
Quite often those change approval boards are kind of like going up against a jury of your supposed peers, because you're given all this information right beforehand that you've never seen, i.e. evidence, and you're now, either having to make a case for, to be honest, I used to make cases for why I wouldn't do it and why I needed more time, because, the having it that late in the piece, is not acceptable, and because mistakes get made. I don't have enough time to peer review it. I don't have enough time to get it peer reviewed by other people, and it's just one thing after another that just stacks up. And the change board, they're worried about what's going to happen to the business, and it shouldn't be that way.
So honestly, you're going to be in that perspective of not really wanting to advocate for the change, even if there's okay communication. Because with okay communication, you only get involved when things are right. You're still like, I don't really know what's in here. And it's in the DBA's interest, who's generally charged with stability, to be like, we shouldn't trust this. Right?
Yes, that's where the DBAs get their fame of being neurotic and averse to changes. That's where it all started.
Yeah. Another interesting finding from that State of Database DevOps report from 2019 is with these silos, aside from what we've talked about with change management, what are other problems with having the silos between the database administrators and DBAs? And the number one in there is increased risk of failed deployments or downtime when introducing changes. Slow development and release cycles is number two, and the inability to respond quickly to changing business requirements is number three. So everything on this list is pretty painful. Maybe, I don't know about other can be pretty painful too. But these things are attributed, people think, having this break between teams makes these all worse. And that number one of increased risk of failed deployments is exactly why this conversation isn't going well at the change approval board. Like, we're really, really worried about this. So if we look at this, 40% said team integration is good, but even good is just getting involved on an ad hoc basis. That doesn't mean really giving advice on all changes and having input in all places and doing co-review of everything, at least at a high level. It's just sort of whenever we can get it done. So 79% did not say, hey, we're effectively working as one team. People are really quite separated. So our question today, since we're talking about automated provisioning, is automated provisioning actually going to impact these silos at all, or is it actually going to just kind of give the people reasons to not talk to one another? Is it going to make the silos even sort of stronger because then we don't even interact as much? How does provision actually play out in the real world?
It most definitely improves it. It most definitely improves the quality of the relationship between teams, because we're always going to have, so if you have to manually refresh lower environments, it's always going to be a massive, labor intensive and time consuming operation. So as your database grow, each of steps of the process is going to take longer, it's going to become more complex, especially now with all the compliance and governance regulations that are in place. So if you're a developer, you're probably thinking that the process should be faster, and the DBA is, you're blaming the DBA for slowing you down. And if you're the DBA, you're probably blaming the devs for creating work from doing all the things that you'd rather be doing. So having the ability to automatically offer these ready to consume, anonymized and self-serviceable copies of your database, it's not only immediately removing those pains from this very fundamental, critical and necessary task, but it's also on top of all that starting to provide immediate return of investment for the business, because now you have your DBAs and your developers focusing on more efficient and better ways to deliver value for their customers. So it's like win-win-win-win. Everyone is happy, and most definitely it improves the team relationship.
Yep. I think one of the key things there was the word standardized tools. And part of that is part of the problem of the siloed teams, in that, hey, I've created this query in Visual Studio using Entity Framework, and it's going to generate this, and I'm going to hand it over to you to go and deploy it. Or, you know, and some of that output might be that you've got to run a SQL script in Management Studio, and by the way, I'm going to give it to you at 4:30 in the afternoon. Whereas the key thing about automated provisioning means that one of the reasons why the DBA can't provision your databases is because the DBA is working on manual deploys, and the data is so big that the DBA has to use, you know, either custom in-house, you know, written scripts that take a wee while, and we've got to obfuscate the data. Whereas by having a platform, and a platform that's self-service, so the DBA is involved in the sense of ensuring that everything is nice and secure in terms of how the tooling works, but it starts this whole conversation of bringing it together, and that's the cool thing about automation. People think, well, I'll just do it. Automating is going to automate myself out of a job. No, what it's going to do is, if you've got a platform of tooling that you both are using, both in terms of DBA and devs, it allows you to start talking about the common goal. The common goal is to get a system provisioned as quick as. Suddenly the DBA is not having to manually watch something, having to deal with, you know, the bad exceptions associated with their code. I've been there. I wrote beautiful code until it broke. And you know, so it's actually a bridge between the two camps, shall we say, or the two silos, because again, it comes down to the common goal. Hey, let's spin up a system that, one, is automated, two, we know that the data is being sanitized, and it's around self-service. I think once you embrace that, people are going to in fact talk more, and they're going to talk. Once they see the magic of automation, they're going to go, hey, what else could we automate?
Right. And that, I think, is really important, because so I have been the DBA who was in charge of provisioning the huge environment that took minimum week and a half, usually 2.5 weeks to set up, because we had to very carefully restore things at the right times and set up replication and do all this stuff, right? It wasn't just a matter of restoring the databases, but even restoring the databases, we were doing it with just backup and restore, and even that took a long time.
Yep.
And I've also been the DBA who accidentally deleted half of the environment of a dev environment with automation, which normally wouldn't be that big a deal, but it put that team without a working like QA environment for 2.5 weeks, right? Which was kind of a big deal, kind of a big problem. They were real nice about it, but no one wants to have that conversation. So automated provisioning can really alleviate those negative things that can happen between teams of I'm always waiting on you or you messed up my stuff. But I do think it is true that like no product you buy out of the box is going to help your teams collaborate, like it's going to make them collaborate. Like it can make it easier to collaborate, but you do have to take that extra effort to say, hey, we are doing this as part of a larger thing, and we want to use the time we're saving for other things. Because if we just throw this in there, yeah, it can make us more efficient, but it isn't necessarily gonna it's not gonna force us to collaborate.
No,
right?
And,
Like,
in fact, that's one of the underpinning things of DevOps, that people who try to download DevOps, first of all, fail because you can't. And two, they forget the most important thing. It's actually people and culture. And if you don't have a culture of collaboration, guess what? You can have the best tools in the world and your process will still fail.
Yeah.
Culture.
So this tool can work really well even if you don't have the culture, but it's not going to make the culture come.
No,
You can't do that.
But it can be a catalyst because, it's not.
I think it can be a huge catalyst because you can make huge gains with this in terms of the ability to spin up environments really quickly.
Gains, absolutely.
Yeah. Because this technology can let you create an image and then you can even apply masking.
Easy to use as well.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say exactly that. Like it's so easy and so comprehensive that it's just so easy to use that it naturally elevates the collaboration. But of course there is a business effort to implement that on a higher level. But it's just so much easier, and the benefits are so immediate that I definitely encourage everyone to try to adopt that.
Yeah. So this slide, what are the cases other than DevOps environments where SQL provision can make a difference? So if you're using Waterfall, for example, to me, even in a Waterfall deployment where maybe we're releasing every 3 months, but then we're still going to have to do a big development environment refresh generally after we deploy every 3 months. Like even there, it can still really, really help us a lot because that deploy can be really slow. Are there other use cases that you've come across for this for different things than DevOps?
So I have, it's why I have wrinkles. I have worked in a waterfall environment, right? And I mean, even in that situation, I still, regardless of waterfall or agile, whatever, before any deployment, I'm always going to refresh my pre-prod environment, and I may, or staging or whatever. And in a waterfall environment, I know pretty much when that's going to be. It's going to be right at the end, and we're going to do a lot of testing. But look, the underlying thing is I want to do it as quickly and as standard as I can. And if that means that, again, it's automated, that it's just a job that kicks off and it notifies people, then look, it doesn't matter if you are not in a true agile environment, or if you not doing DevOps. That's all good. The main thing here is about provisioning and protecting your data, your database, down to either lower levels or just having that nice dry run before you're about to deploy to prod.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Richard McCaskill, who's a product manager at Redgate, has an interesting story about a client who actually, they want to run a bunch of different data variation tests each night. And they like to use SQL provision to clone out a bunch of different copies of a database and run these tests against that latest version of the data in a kind of scale out processing model. And it works well for them, just the combination, the way their code is written. They don't want one giant monolithic SQL server with this all running against all of them. It enables them to do an architecture and set up the environment really quickly in a way to run those data load tests, which is really, really, I think, an interesting use case. So in some ways, it can replace, well, not in some ways, in many ways, things that you would use SAN cloning for can be anything, one of those things, this can really enable you to do in a flexible way with PowerShell commandlets and like automate it and make it user friendly, which is really cool. So
absolutely.
kind of I always try to think of like new fun things that might be interesting to do with it, just because it's so fast.
That is a good use case. I'd be keen to, you know, understand a little bit more about that. That's pretty cool what they're doing.
I think it's financial data testing is I think where it happens.
Cool.
All right, next topic. What is the biggest problem that automated provisioning solves? And we are mostly talking about a DevOps context with this. In the 2019 State of Database DevOps report, in question 10, people were asked, in terms of doing a wider DevOps process, what would you see as the main driver? 30% of folks said the main driver is to increase speed of delivery of database changes, as Hamish said, to make it go faster. 17% said to free up developers' time for more added value work. And there's other surveys I've seen. Stripe sponsored a survey by Harris Poll where they interviewed, or surveyed rather, more than 1,000 C-level executives. And this one here, for that audience, this was a top concern for C-level executives to free up developer time for more value-added work. And in this poll, which was for a very wide audience, it came in second. So really, really important to a lot of groups of people. Number 3 is to reduce the risk of losing data. So this is definitely an opinion question, right? I'm asking you guys, and I'm going to go back to the previous slide, of the things on this list, which do you think is the most important driver? Do you think the most important thing is, you agree with the audience? This is kind of a Family Feud style question, right? But you can see the answers first. Or do you think one of the ones lower down is actually the most important?
As a DBA, it's number 3. Yeah, it's given, right?
Yeah, it depends which hat I have on.
Yeah,
exactly. And but I can definitely, for me, the biggest drive is the ability to facilitate the shift between away from working on a shared development environment to a more dedicated development environment where every developer has the ability to work on their own copy of the database, which increases efficiency dramatically. So I guess the second option there, the ability to free up developers' time for more added value work, it's incredibly enhanced by facilitating that shift. And it extremely well in that, because it removes all those barriers that probably were in place when a shared development environment was established to begin with, where you have infrastructure limitations, you have the amount of man hours that were necessary to not only, like we discussed, like you said earlier, Kendra, like not only to refresh those environments, also to maintain it. So SQL Provision removes all that and facilitates this whole new approach to database development.
Excuse me. The number one reason that people have put there, right, to increase speed of delivery of database changes.
That's my take on it.
But it can also increase the quality of the delivery of database changes. The reason why I say that is often either in waterfall or even agile systems, if your systems are not of the same structure, the same setup, you know, they're not prod-like. You know, how many times is your UAT or staging system completely different to prod?
Right.
And that to me is linked to obviously the third one, to reduce the risk of losing data. But in fact, I don't want to lose data, but I also don't want bugs being introduced into prod system. And so if there's some mechanism that I can quickly, efficiently automate the provisioning of a prod-like system, that's going to help the quality of my delivery. Because, you know, we want to be fast paced. We want to deliver value as quick as. But there's no point delivering value real quick if I'm delivering value that's full of bugs. And I want my staging, my pre-prod systems to be almost mirrored to what prod is.
Right. Yeah, I think it's not very obvious at all that automated provisioning can minimize application downtime. I've seen this happen. So for example, if we don't have automated provisioning, one of the things we typically do is use a very small data size in our development and QA environments that's nothing like production. So we could be doing something like adding a new index or like changing a column in a table, and it goes really fast in QA and it goes really fast and then it gets to prod and it takes a really long time and locks up the entire table, causes a big blocking storm, and to the customer, the system is unresponsive.
Yes.
It worked fine on my machine because my machine didn't have anything near that data set. So being able to efficiently provision this and not have to wait 2 weeks for my database and have something like production data not only helps me write an update script that's actually I can verify does it actually update the right data, but also helps me know is my change going to lock something up for a long time, which is really crucial to know about a lot of systems, I think. So I think it really speaks to, in terms of like explaining to people what would this help us with, I think it actually speaks really well to all of these. And it really does kind of depend. Are you more worried about an outage, or are you more worried about freeing up developer time and increase, because it can actually, it will feed all of these in terms of improvements. Some people might just see this top one and be like, oh, it increases speed of delivery. It's just going to make the bugs go faster.
And that's why but
it's not even about how.
Oh.
I was going to say is that it's not about how fast you deliver. It's about having the ability to deliver as soon as you are ready for it.
Yeah, and to deliver quality as soon as it's ready.
For sure.
Yes.
That's it.
Finding number 14 in the State of Database DevOps report made me real sad. Question number 14, they asked, what are you doing? And they asked it both, currently, what practices are presently in place for application, that's the left column, and for databases, that's the right column. And for automated provisioning, 37% are using it for application, so they can spin up web servers real fast. Wow. But only 19% are doing it for database. So my question for you is, why is this low, right? Like, I saw this 19% and I was just like, oh, why is this so low? It's so great to have automated provisioning, right? So why is this not a bigger thing? What is you guys' take on that?
Oh, honestly, for me, I believe it's to do with lack of awareness that automated provisioning is even a thing in the database world. Like any business that performs database changes on a development environment of any sort would benefit dramatically from SQL provisioning or any sorts of database automation, the provisioning automation, especially after noticing how extremely easy life becomes. So, which, by the way, I'm the one that can do that. I'm using the Redgate shirt. So if you're interested in everything that we're saying, you can just jump into our website. We can download SQL Provision, have a 14-day trial, and experience firsthand how easy, how intuitive, and how much your business is going to benefit, and how much of a hero you're going to look like after implementing all these fantastic solutions on your own organization.
Yeah.
This is very unusual for a New Zealander to ever say this, but I'm going to do some role play, and I'm not going to laugh or anything. Okay.
Okay.
The key word here for me, I'm the grumpy DBA, and the reason why I'm a grumpy DBA is because everyone keeps dumping all this stuff on me. I've got to do these manual deploys. You want me to automate something? I haven't got enough time to write those scripts. I haven't got enough time because I'm not automating the deploys. Let me try and automate the deploys, because I've got so much work on and I don't have time to write the scripts. And believe it or not, that role play is what I see out there. I talk with DBAs who are under pressure, and the reason they're under pressure is they don't have their database in source control. They don't have a true representation of the model of the database. So anytime a change is made, guess who they trust? No one except themselves. And so it's just this flow-on effect, because I've got to check all this stuff, because this is the first time I've seen the script. It's probably the first time the script has been run near anything like prod, i.e. I'm running it in prod. So I'm going to spend 4 hours going over something that I should have known about before. So that's part of the problem, is that I care about my database. I'm not a bad DBA, by the way.
Yeah.
I want to protect production. And so I will do all these manual steps, because that is just second nature. I've got to protect it. And so ergo, when it comes to provisioning, oh man, I don't have enough time to try and write the script to automate the provisioning of it, because by the way, I have to write the script to provision this, because it's prod data here. I can't trust anyone. I'm the gatekeeper of the data. And that's the problem. That's why people aren't using automated provisioning for databases, because they feel like the onus is on them to write this whole lot of stuff. And in fact, it's not so much about the provisioning, it's all the checks to do afterwards. It's ensuring, I've got a 500 gig database. I've got to make sure there's 500 gig free over here, because it's all about space, about where I'm provisioning. And so it's just a behemoth. And I feel that that's the holdback, that people are not embracing enough automation anyway, and provisioning falls under that umbrella of, I've got to do it.
Yeah. I'm working with this very, very smart DBA on a proof of concept right now. And she went and saw a demo of SQL provision and saw how it saves on space, can apply data masking to the images at the time of the image creation so that it's automatically in the clones, can solve a lot of these problems. And she realized, hey, if we have a data breach, a lot of that responsibility is mine, but she doesn't have a ton of time. So what she figured out she could do in her organization is start up the project and kind of lead the way in here, but also bring in a project manager who isn't a big tech person. That person isn't a DBA, but that person, because the truth is, to use SQL Clone, you don't have to be super technical. Setting it up is not super hard. You need a sysadmin to help you set it up, right? But in terms of figuring out what is the data that should be masking and what policies do we want around the images, you can really task a business person with doing that. So the DBA team in this case is like, we really need to address this issue. We are the guardians of this. But then she's setting up the project in a way where she's a leader, but she's not actually doing all the work. Which I think is the smartest thing you can possibly do.
I love that for two reasons. One, it's really efficient, right? And two, it's collaborative. That's fantastic. That's
you're getting buy-in from all these different levels of the organization. It's fantastic.
And people on the business side should be understanding what is the nature of the data we're storing, what is its confidentiality levels, right? That isn't something that just people in the DBA team should own. That is a business problem to document and solve.
Sure.
Yeah. So she's a smarty. She's my hero. Pretty excited about her. It's a career builder, right? Being able to say that you championed this project and led this team to get this into place is just an amazing thing to get to put on your resume.
Yes, and it's a good use case to get out there to the community as well, because how many times do people get stuck in their own silo that they are the guardian, when in fact you are being guardian for the business, ergo work with the business and let them manage that part of it. That's a good use case. Yeah.
And that way, every time a new field is added, you do not have to be a block in that process of figuring out what level of confidentiality does this column in this new table have. You can be looped in on it, you'll have access to the information, but it doesn't all have to flow through you, so you can go on vacation. It's good to go on vacation. All right, so next up, I love this question. Should developers use shared or dedicated database development environments? And we have a little fact that we're going to start out with from the 2019 State of Database DevOps report. We asked survey respondents, do you do database development work in a shared environment or in dedicated environments? And 46% said everything is shared. 35% said some of each. Only 19% said we just use dedicated environments. So this is not obvious at all how good or bad this is, right? Like, what's the big difference between using this, especially if I have maybe a terabyte database, right? Like, what's the big deal with using a shared database? So is it a bad practice to develop in a shared environment? Using something like automated provisioning makes it much easier for each developer to have their own environment. But what exactly does this make easier and why? Because it's not obvious when you first think about it.
Anderson, were you gonna? Because I'm gonna talk for ages. So
I was just like, I have a novel written about this, actually.
Yeah. I'm happy to go second if you want, mate.
I think Anderson has actually frozen. I think this question has stunned him.
I know.
Yeah, so you should go, Hamish.
Alrighty. Look, shared environments, there's arguments on why you may or may not want to use them, because one of the reasons people do use shared environments, because I'm going to it is a bad practice to develop in a shared environment, but I'm going to tell you some of the reasons why people do still do it, and it feels like second nature.
There's a lot of them still doing it, so why is that happening?
Almost half. And I mean, it's because databases are complicated, right? I mean, they're not the most easiest things to get up and running for people. And if I want to set up a web app, it's a couple of DLLs. But having my own dedicated database and having that mirror as close as possible to my prod system. I talked about ProdLite before, right? And so setting up that shared environment, hey team, we're going to refresh the shared environment on Sunday night, and you can all have, you can all use it. That's kind of easy, but it's not that easy because there's a whole heap of issues associated with you using a shared database, right? So my change is going to affect your change that you're, do you know what I mean?
Right. Even if I create a branch, if we're using the same database over in my branch, if you modify something that the code isn't in my branch, I'm still going to see it in the database.
Thank you so much. I didn't know whether to start going on my branch rant. But that's the thing, right? Because I was worried if I started talking about branching, most of the DBAs would go be like, branching? What's this branching? The thing is one of the reasons we use shared environments like this is because it's so hard to refresh them. It's so hard to get a copy that I know is going to be as close to prod, especially if I have that 1 terabyte database. I don't have a 1 terabyte either drive on my laptop, or we don't have 50 terabytes for 50 copies of the database. So I'm sorry, the teams of 50 people out there, you don't get a database each, because so it's bad practice, because my changes will overwrite yours. If you're on another branch, as you said, you don't pick up my changes, and suddenly we've got this mess. And I feel this. So when I started looking at SQL Clone way back when, the thing that got me was I could spin up, first of all, environments that were, with exact copies of prod. I did a bit of data mask and whatever. But it took up like 50 megabytes of space initially, right? Because it's a snapshot, it uses some of the same technology that our SANs do and whatever. storage, snapshots, whatever. It just does it better because it understands the database.
And the changes that, like, if we both have a clone created off the same image, the changes that you make to yours will not show up in mine. Our writes are isolated from one another on our particular clones, and they act just like normal databases. So we can have these databases that only take up the amount of space for the amount that we've changed in our database, and we are isolated in our little database. So maybe to clarify, for people who don't understand branching deeply, maybe to clarify, one of the major uses of branching in source control is to provide isolation when developing a feature. So I might create a branch in my source control to work on a change in isolation. Having a dedicated database actually gives me that isolation for databases. Without that, I actually don't have that isolation at all, so that everybody's seeing my stuff before I have any idea whether I want anyone to see my nasty changes or not.
Perfect. And by committing those on a dedicated environment, you make your changes, you commit those changes, and then that change is actually made available to everyone else to have a look at it. It went through the whole test and validation process that every efficient DevOps best practice introduces. So when that change has been validated, and only then that's going to be available for everyone else to collaborate with, not before, not when it's faulty.
Yeah. Now, if you are a team of 2 people, if you're a team of 2 developers and you sit next to each other at work, the pain of this is going to be less than if you're a team of 4 developers or 6 developers. The pain of this increases as your team size increases. Even with just 2 people, you can create quite a mess, but it gets exponentially worse the larger and larger your team gets. So if you're a team of 2 people and you want to use the object locking feature in SQL source control with a shared database, yeah, occasionally you're going to have to be like, can you unlock that stuff? But as your team grows, the pain will get worse.
I always likened it to, because a lot of what we're doing in DevOps for the database, has been evolution of some of what application developers have done, right? So we're suddenly putting our database in the source control, we're doing branching and for the isolation, whatever. But I always liken a shared database environment like saying to a team of developers, hey, rather than having all that, all that code on your machine, let's put all your, your C# code or whatever on a network drive, and you can all develop off that. That's madness.
Yeah.
I also.
Let's just use Dropbox. Why use source control at all?
And unit testing.
We're using SharePoint. Oh, that's not funny, is it?
No.
Some jokes aren't funny.
Well, I guess the reason why shared environments became a thing is originally due to the limitations that we discussed earlier around infrastructure and the time that it would take to actually successfully maintain those environments. But again, that's when SQL provision it's a game changer. It removes all those barriers and enhances efficiency on a level that we haven't been used to seeing before.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that SQL provision does that isn't obvious is that it not only allows you to create clones, but it's combining really 2 tools. SQL provision is a family of tools, a small family. It combines provisioning in SQL clone, and then it combines that with data masking as well. So when you are setting up an image itself, you can choose to modify that image. You can apply masking to it. You could also do modifications when you're creating the clones, but you really want to generally do it when you're creating the image that it's pre-done and all of your clones are just ready to go without modifications. But if you need to do custom scripting for things like users, for individual clones, you do have some freedom there. But when it comes to masking production data, we did ask some questions about that in the 2019 State of Database DevOps report. And we just asked, so the data in your dev and test environments, what kind of data are you using? And people could give multiple answers because sometimes we do have different environments that have different types of data in them. Yeah, 65% of responders said at least some of their environments is a copy of production. 36% said the sensitive data is masked. That's a really small number. 30% said it's a subset of the total data. So some of these folks may not be doing masking. They may be saying, well, we're just tables that have sensitive data in them. We just truncate those and we just remove columns. And 29% said the data is manually created. So we don't even use production data. We are just generating that data either manually, that's 29%, or automatically, that's 18%. So the question here is, which of these is better? And you don't have, I mean, you can have a favorite, but you also may have different cases where this is better. You know, some things are better than others. So in terms of these scenarios, which of these scenarios is generally best, but are there other cases where you would use something like manually creating or automatically creating data, or doing a subset of the total data?
Well, it's the only actual scenario where generating data automatically would be feasible for me is when we're talking about testing. So if you want to generate a workload to validate if this new index that you've created is going to be efficient or not, or how that interacts with your environment, then yes, absolutely, I see value in that. But when it comes to QA or UAT, absolutely, you want to have, in order to have the most realistic outcome and most precise, more accurate outcome, you want to be able to have data that it's that looks like production, that it has the same density, so your tables are have the same distribution in terms of data. So in order to achieve that, statically masking your data would be the most efficient way to achieve that level of accuracy that it's ideal in terms of successful development.
Yeah,
it's my take.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree, really, in terms of,
Pretty much,
yeah.
only pretty much.
Yeah. I'm a Kiwi. We understate everything, except rugby. And even then, we just go, yeah, we won. Cool. We actually normally thank the other team for turning up, but anyway. Nicely too, by the way. Look, one of the reasons why I'm a fan of generating data is because there are times where I don't want the test to run over 1 million rows. I may only want to run over 10 rows because, you know, for this, that, and the other. But as we move up higher in the environment level, then I need to get as prod-like as I can. And don't get me wrong, the whole way through from dev, QA, functional test, you know, system integration, UAT, staging, whatever, they're all prod-like, i.e. I'm still deploying to them from a model that's defined in source control. But I may need to seed some of the lower environments with just a little bit of referential data. But again, I need, as I move higher up, especially if I'm stress testing. So, you know, a number of times I have clients that don't have a performance testing environment. Why don't you have a performance testing environment? Because we don't have the space for it. We don't have this and we don't have that. And one of the things that, you know, the likes of SQL Provision helps with is we're going to have a smaller footprint for some activities, but also we can mask the data. You can truncate the data, but there may be issues associated with that, and you may in fact introduce bugs that, you know, your software is not used to, you know, having no data whatsoever in that table. So if you can mask it and you can do that efficiently in an automated fashion, then, you know, that's where things like data masking, you need to, you know, utilize them, because without them, you've either got no data, or worse, you've got confidential data sitting outside of a prod environment, and that's
Where
just
a lot of people may have access to it, who need access to it,
For
right?
sure.
correct.
These days, hackers, like people who want to get to your data, they may try to hack through they may try a SQL injection attack. They might through production, but they're also much more likely to say, I'm going to try a phishing attack on the people in this organization and see whose network credentials I can get so I can log in as them. And then even if they're a developer who has permission to a lower environment, there may be all sorts of goodies, not really goodies, in that environment that suddenly they have access to if it hasn't been masked. So
Absolutely.
yeah, the nature of data breaches isn't what it was 15 years ago.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
It's very, very worth bringing it up, like the level of the amount of data breaches that are coming from internal actors is exponentially higher these days. So because our lower environments aren't as protected as our production, it's absolutely, it's paramount that we take all the necessary actions to make sure that those lower environments do not have any sensitive data in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
One of the questions that comes up sometimes, especially with QA environments, is how about performance with this? If I'm using this for QA and I'm masking the data, like, does every read against the database in QA, like if I have multiple clones, does every read against each of those clones, does it have to go back to and read the same image? Am I just going to kill the drive behind that image? And one thing to know about how this works is these databases still act like databases. If you give them memory for the SQL Server buffer pool for reads, the first read, yes, it will go and it will read from the image, but then it will cache it on the clone database and it will be able to fetch it from there again. So we have to learn a little bit about how these work, but this can enable us to unlock it for these environments, and the databases still act like databases. They still perform like databases, even though there's magic behind the scenes making it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I was going to answer to the fact of why the data is a copy of production, i.e. why 65% probably tick this box. It's so hard to try and work out how to mask the data. If only there was a way in which I could use some algorithms to mask the data in a self-service way, in such a way. So what I'm saying here is that the data masking part of SQL provision, man, I tell you what, it's really cool because it helped me, mask the data.
Right.
I didn't have to write horrible convoluted scripts that were beautiful, but 69% of the time they worked all the time.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And you do want a tool as well that if you do bring in a business user to help actually execute on some of this stuff, you don't want them to have to learn to write T-SQL. That's not something they should have to learn to do. You want to be able to give them a tool.
Yes.
I want them to be able to use a tool.
Yeah, exactly. And that empowers them as well. And again, it's a catalyst for that collaboration stuff. So often I'm in a cupboard writing T-SQL because no one wants to talk to me. And when they come to me with their business needs, I have to write the T-SQL. Whereas with this utility, then they can use it themselves because they know more about that stuff than I do. I know just a little bit more about T-SQL than them. So if they start learning T-SQL, I'm out of a job.
They'll just lock the cupboard at that point.
Yeah, I'll never get out.
That's no good. So we have a final question based on this fact. The question number 24 on the survey, the Database DevOps Report survey, was, would your production data need to be modified or masked before use in development, test, or QA environments? So no matter what you're doing, just if you were to use that data, would it need to be masked? And 53% said it would need to be masked, 33% no, and 14% said not sure. So my question to you is, do you think this 53% of production data needing to be masked, do you think that these people were kind of overestimating, underestimating, or what? Like, do you think that really only 53% of these databases have data in them that needs to be masked? Because this
Yeah,
seems incredibly low to me.
absolutely, absolutely, and that's my call as well. My call is that that number is extremely low. Like it's quite unusual for a database not to have at least some data that can be used to personally identify someone, being
Right.
that someone a vendor or an employee or a client, someone. So, and if there is such thing, and with that in mind, if any development is being done on that database, as a business, we need to make sure that we are taking all the possible measures to protect that data, not only on production, as I expect everyone is already doing that, some to protect it, but also as that data leaves production to our lower environment. So I guess one big incentive to protecting that data is the rapid growth on the number of regulatory bodies around compliance requirements, which in itself, it's a statement that evidences that need. So I definitely think that number is way too low.
Here's the deal, right? One of the great things is it's February 2018. We don't have to worry about GDPR. It's going to happen in May, right? Like we're going to fix our systems before May. It's February 2019 and people have not got it.
Yeah.
People,
Yeah.
GDPR.
A lot of us still don't understand what harm can be done just by having someone's phone number. And this has become more well known lately, but many people, like if your phone number is out there, people can often find other facts about you in the public record. And they can do something like call up your phone provider and port your phone number. They can do what's called a SIM hijacking by using this other data they found about you from all of these data breaches that have happened to get temporary control of your phone number. And then guess how, even if you have two-factor auth set up, guess what it's all based off of? Once someone has your phone, they can wreak horrible havoc on your life. So even a column as simple as phone number, that needs to be taken care of. Which I think it wasn't obvious to me until fairly recently that was true. So.
Yeah, exactly. And again, sorry for hacking your phone, Kendra. It seemed a joke at the time. I was like, this will be funny. But yeah.
Just made a few purchases on your credit card.
Yeah.
Really, it was good stuff, right?
My view, it's way too low. It's not 53%. It should be like 98, 99, even 100%, because any information, my name, yeah.
It's too valuable.
Yeah.
Well, the Northwind database, none of the data in there has to be maxed. The Microsoft Northwind database is perfectly safe.
99.9%.
99.9%.
100 million Northwind databases out there. They're okay.
Yeah, just put a copy of Northwind in your production environment and name it top secret, most valuable information, and that will draw all of the hackers to that database. They'll ignore everything else. This is a brilliant
Wow,
idea.
that was gold, Kendra. That's perfect.
Perfect. All of my ideas are very, very good. All right, well, we have reached the end of our time. Thank you, Hamish, and thank you, Anderson, for joining me today. This has been a ton of fun.
That was amazing. Thank you very much.
All right. You have a great day in your parts of the world. And for those of us who aren't here, who I'm talking to through this recording, yes, you will be seeing this recording online later. Bye, folks. Have a great day.
Bye.
Later.
Thanks, Hamish.
Hey, man.